colonization are present on campus and in the Halifax community. This is reflected in a number of ways, including, but not limited to, the underrepresentation of Indigenous students enrolled in university, ongoing racism faced by Indigenous people, the disproportionate number of Indigenous people in the judicial system, the high number of Indigenous children in state care, a chronic lack of basic services available to Indigenous communities, the failure of government to honor treaty rights, and the disproportionate levels of violence faced by Indigenous women. The Dalhousie Student Union recognizes and respects the Mi'kmaq people as the traditional keepers of this land with valuable coded knowledge regarding its use and value, and seeks to honor the relational treaty process in its programming, events, and meetings. And I hope that the candidates and others will keep this in mind during tonight's debate.
Thanks, Dan. So the format for tonight's debate will be pretty straightforward. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to introduce themselves. The speaking order was randomly determined prior to the start of the debate. Then we'll be taking some video questions that were submitted prior to the debate, as well as some audience questions. Each candidate will get 2 minutes to respond to the question, and then each candidate will be given a 1-minute rebuttal. Finally, we will give each candidate 2 minutes for closing remarks.
If you want to submit a question, there is a box for submissions by the door in the back with some paper and some pens. So also don't worry if we don't get to your question tonight. We're going to send all the questions asked to the parties. Also, if you're on Twitter, we're tweeting with 2 different hashtags. One is hashtag It's No Secret, and the second hashtag is subdebate, so S-U-B and debate.
All right, so let's get started. We're going to start over here with Andy Fillmore, but before we do that, we've also been given a fun fact about each of our candidates. So the fun fact for Andy Fillmore is among his family and friends, Andy is known as a karaoke champion. Andy, you have 2 minutes.
Ready to roll?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And it's dangerous to give me a microphone with that introduction now. Well, look, it's great to, it's great to be at Dalhousie tonight, and I was going to say it's great to be back, but really, it's in a way I've never really left. You know, I grew up on the edge of this campus and learned to ride my bike at the Dal campus, and in fact, just last year I had the great privilege of teaching my daughter how to ride her bike on the Dal campus too. And you know, my youth of exploring the campus and being amazed by the Aquatron and the Dawson Print Shop. It's just been an amazing thing to have in my life all these years. But before we get into the questions and into the real topics of tonight, I wanted to provide a little bit of context so that you know where my voice is coming from when we have the discussion tonight. And I think a lot of you may know that I'm a double Dalhousie graduate in architecture and city planning. And for a while, I was also the director of and a professor in the School of Planning down on the Sexton campus. And before that, for many years, I was a sessional instructor there. And I've kept my involvement with Dalhousie going over the years. I sit on a number of committees and advisory and fundraising committees, including the committee that's getting the bike lane put into the University Avenue, the committee that's doing leading the great renovation here at the Sub. So I've also been involved as a student activist on campus in my student years, as a member of student government, president of my student society, and class presidents here and there. So I have done that on campus and off campus in my professional work here in Halifax. As a city planner, I've been involved in acknowledging the role of students and the universities in Halifax in the local economy and the role in the community in building a strong city. And that is sort of gets reflected in policy over the years as we grow our city, which is really important. But most importantly, I want you to know that I'm invested in this city, but really that I'm invested in you, each and every one of you, and make sure that you get the opportunity to make the most of your education and stay here in Halifax and help to make this city great. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Next, we have from the Marxist-Leninist Party, Alan Bezanson. Alan is a bit concerned about an upcoming all-candidates forum on food issues and healthy, sustainable food, as he is a firm believer in the 5 basic C's: cookies, chips, cake, chocolate, and coffee, plus the Dogfather's burgers. So next we have Alan.
Thank you. It was a lot more funny when I wrote it. But I do have the pot belly to say that I love all those things. But I also firmly believe in food sustainability, etc. My party, the Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada, and you can see our website on there. I'll refer to it a couple times. Please log on to it. We are not a rich party. We're a small party. We don't have millions of dollars to advertise, as do some of the parties up here. And when they do advertise, I believe they get 50% of their money back, their expenses, from the taxpayer. We say this system is rotten to the core. You've heard of oil cartels. You've heard of Mexican crime cartels. We have a party cartel system which removes people from exercising their sovereignty, from exercising their democratic rights to select the candidates, to dictate to the candidates how they should vote in Parliament. None of this British parliamentary tradition with party whips, etc., dictating. It's you, the constituents, that must dictate to Megan when she gets re-elected how she should vote. So my party also, I am an anti-war candidate in this election. My party stands for withdrawal from NATO, withdrawal from NORAD, withdrawal from any military, as well as economic pacts that tie our country, that I love so dear, into the imperialist network of countries led by U.S. imperialism. So we oppose that. I've just been informed that there's a candidates debate on Syria coming up. I say hands off Syria, no to the no-fly zones, and let the Syrian people sort out their issues. I have a lot more things to say. My party came out of the youth and student movement. I have been a student of life ever since I left Dal, and I'm still always on campus. So I salute you and carry on the good work.
I wonder if I could just invite my co-candidates to join me in allowing the people in the audience and the people of the community to determine the outcome of the election. Not Alan, none of us. Let's just let the process run, okay? None of us know who's going to win this election. Let's let the people decide that.
I think it's pretty safe.
All right, so we're going to keep going. Next, we have Thomas Trappenberg from the Green Party. Thomas is the president of the Halifax Hakodate Friendship Association and a volunteer karate teacher in Hatchet Lake. So Thomas, you have 2 minutes.
Yes, so far I didn't have to use karate, so it's pretty good. I plan to debate a little bit more tonight, but not with karate techniques. So I'm actually a scientist and not a politician, and so I should explain to you why I'm running here. My dad was a meteorologist with some specialization in microclimates, and he told me over 35 years ago that a 2-degree increase of the average temperature would devastate our ecosystem. We are now nearly there, and we are paying already dearly for it. Climate change has so far not been part of this debate, and sorry I have to use my opening remark to bring it at least in here. We have lost, since 1970, half of our marine population. As far as I know, Canada has not yet submitted any climate action plan for the conference which is coming up in Paris. And 20 years ago, we were an environmental leader. Now we are leading actually the destruction. Harper is destroying our country. He is preventing scientists from speaking out, and he plainly lies to Canadians. The oil industry is subsidized by $46 billion US, and enough to pay actually for all the universities. Poverty is on the rise, healthcare costs will kill us, and this is pure greed and not the cost of science. I don't think that Tom Mulcair is actually much better. He bashed his own candidate, Linda McQuay, on speaking out that some of the oil has to stay in ground, well backed up by an article in Nature. And it's just a shame, because I know the NDP has worked hard on this. The environmental critic of the official opposition, Ms. Leslie, has allowed gas exploration in our riding, in actually a national park in our riding. And Tom Mulcair introduced a cap and trade system just yesterday. Of course, they have part of this already a long time. It is, I'm out. All right. Still, this list to say.
Yeah, serious.
Thank you, Thomas. Next, we're going to hear from Irvin Carvery of the Conservative Party. Irvin is a lifelong basketball enthusiast and has coached and refereed basketball in Halifax for decades. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back at Dal. I'm a graduate of Dal myself. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm 7th generation Haligonian, born in Africville, Nova Scotia. I have spent the large part of my life working towards the resolution on the question of Africville. And finally, in 2010, we got a settlement with HRM around the question, and we immediately rebuilt our church in Africville. I am a basketball, fanatic. I've coached at St. Pat's High. I've refereed for over 25 years in basketball. I'm married. I have 3 children, and I'm a very proud grandfather of 5 children. My wife Monica is here in the audience tonight with me. We live on Maynard Street. I come from very humble beginnings. We were not privileged. We were poor. We were discriminated against. My grandmother on my mother's side is Mi'kmaq, so I share that heritage here. So I am very pleased to be here tonight to get an opportunity just for you to know who I am as an individual with politics aside. I have 30 seconds remaining. It's always good to see the signs go up. You think that 2 minutes isn't a long time, but 2 minutes is a long time when you're talking.
Sing a song.
Unless, of course, I'm talking on the subject of Africville, and usually that takes 3 hours. But I am very pleased to be here tonight at Dal. I'm so happy to see the T-shirts with "Get Out the Vote." Thank you very much. And that is my time.
Thank you, Irvin. And next we have Megan Leslie from the New Democratic Party. Megan is an active member of the Anchor City Rollers, Halifax's own roller derby league, and made history with the first mention of roller derby in the House of Commons. Yeah. Megan, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks very much to the Dalhousie Student Union for organizing this debate tonight. It's great to be here. I am somebody who's always wanted to work on issues of justice. And for me, justice is social justice, economic justice, and environmental justice. I came to Dalhousie to go to law school because I thought, well, law would be a great tool for that kind of change in seeking justice. After law school, I worked at Dalhousie Legal Aid as a community legal worker, working with low-income Nova Scotians on the issues that they faced. And I saw politics as another way to work on issues of justice. So in 2008, I put my name forward and was elected. I've been serving for 7 years as Halifax's Member of Parliament, and I'm proud to bring that voice of Halifax to the House of Commons and a feminist voice to the House of Commons. This is one of the most important elections in our recent history. We must defeat Stephen Harper. But it's not just enough to stop Stephen Harper. We need a caring government. We need a generous government. We need a government that's made up of people who come from diverse backgrounds. I'm so proud that the NDP candidate slate is 43% women, the highest. We have 21 Indigenous candidates. We have candidates with disabilities, candidates from other equity-seeking groups, racial minorities. We need a government that will actually take action on climate change. We need a government that will restore our reputation on the national stage, that will work with provinces and territories, and that will give the respect owed to First Nations and negotiate on a nation-to-nation basis. I believe that the NDP can be that government, and I would be very proud to serve in that government and be a voice for Halifax. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to all the candidates for your opening statements. So direct everyone's attention to the screens. Up first, we have Ali with a video question.
Hi, my name Canada, and I'm an Economics and International Development student here at Dalhousie. The average Nova Scotian student graduates with $35,000 in debt or more, and debt across the entire country is a massive problem. Because of this huge amount of debt, students like myself and my friends and my peers are going to graduate, and we are not even going to be able to think about starting businesses, families, or buying homes, or starting our lives and giving back to the communities in the way that we'd like to. What is your party going to do to solve the debt crisis here in Canada?
I didn't
To wonder why a proton in a magnetic field.
Okay.
Max Headroom.
So first we have candidate Allen.
Irving, did you hear the question?
Not really. Megan's explaining it to me.
Okay. I didn't graduate from Dow. I did 2 years here, but I had a student debt of $2,100, which I didn't pay. They finally got it from me. But you students are facing $35,000 and more. This is a national disgrace that in a rich country like Canada, how long do I have, a minute or two? Two. In a rich country like this, that you have to pay for your tuition. It is the monopoly capitalist corporations who hire so many of you when you graduate or thereafter. They should pay for it. Stop paying the rich, increase funding for social programs. That's the mainstay of my party's program, is that there should be free tuition. It's not just Newfoundland. It's many countries in Europe, etc., that have no free tuition. And that's an extremely important part. There's also the incidental fees, etc., that they tack on to students. I would like to acknowledge John Hutton, who's up in the booth tonight. He recently was in God's country, Cape Breton, to deliver a speech on behalf of students to the Royal Society of Nova Scotia. I really encourage you to read his speech. I read it. It talks about what has to be done on these important issues. Again, I say it should be free tuition. Another thing about a debt, and I'm going to switch here on youth and students, is they owe a debt to their country, and sometimes they're called upon to join the armed forces, etc. That's also a debt. I say not a single youth for imperialist war. I say it's a national disgrace that when our youth do go to war on behalf of Harper or U.S. imperialism, they come back, they're crushed, and their pensions have been taken away. I say increase their pensions. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd just like to remind candidates that we do have a 2-minute speaking time. So next up we have candidate Trappenberg.
All right, thank you very much. So there's actually from your organization fantastic information on the student debt. Everybody should know by now it rose exponentially, much more than everything else, and it's a real problem. I am campaigning since 2006, and one of the major parts is abolishing tuition. I grew up in Germany. I've studied there. There was no tuition. There are many countries who don't have this, and that here education is treated as a business is not acceptable, and it's really a shame that we don't value our youth. So I'm really happy. Please read our platform. It is very clear this is very important to us, and it is absolutely doable. A lot of people ask me, how will, this costs a lot, but as I already mentioned, the subsidies to oil is actually more than we need to pay for all of this. There are many other reasons why we can do this. This will take some time. So also in the platform, we do have, of course, immediate plans. In particular, immediately remove debt over $10,000. And what is more important is also, you come out of this university and the youth unemployment. I think we will probably talk more about this one. So just, abolishing the tuition, you still have to live. You still have to actually work. So it is, that's not, the only thing we have to do, but it's the first step, and there's no reason that we can't do it. So the educational infrastructure is really an asset, and we should keep it, we should treat it as an asset. Our youth, educating our youth, this is what builds our society. And you know, I work at this university, and I'm here because I want to work with students. I want to do research. I want to teach. That's the fun thing. And we are more and more treated really like a business, and I think it's detrimental for the education.
Okay, thank you for that. Next, we'll hear from candidate Carvery, please.
Okay, thank you very much. In terms of tuition and student debt, two different items but related. Student loans make university accessible to those students whose parents cannot afford to pay for their university education. Without the ability for people to have student loans, the university would be exclusively for rich people. Now, tuitions are of course charged by universities, but our government in 2012 reduced the interest rate on part-time student loans to assist in that. But the most important thing, I think, coming out of university is the ability to have a job. You know, and our government is working very hard in creating jobs, good-paying jobs, for students who graduate so that they can manage that student debt. The Irving shipbuilding contract is a good example, and I think we have to recognize that when we talk post-secondary education, we also have to include in that the community colleges, because those students too have to pay tuition. So I think one of the solutions in terms of assisting is the creation of good paying jobs for students when they graduate university. And our government, as I said, is about 12,000 new jobs were created in the month of August. And we will continue to focus on providing opportunities for students when they graduate. Thank you.
Okay, next up, Megan.
Thanks. Collectively as Canadians, we, and I'll say we because I include myself, I took student loans in order to get through school and at the end owed $80,000. We collectively owe $23 billion. That's crazy. Canada has the 5th highest post-secondary education tuition in the OECD. The Conservatives have offered tax breaks, but those really just help the wealthiest. And the Liberals are offering an expansion of educational savings accounts, but what if your family doesn't have the money to put into that account? Tuition's too high. It's not accessible. So how do we solve that problem? You know, I did a year of school in Finland. I'm a Finlander by ethnicity. And not only was my tuition free, not only was my housing free, but all of my classmates got paid to go to school because it was seen as being that important. So how do we get there? Can we get there? I think we can. You'll hear other parties say that this isn't a federal issue. Well, I disagree with that. It can be a federal issue. Yes, the provinces administer and administrate post-secondary education, but the federal government can help. So what the NDP has done is we've developed a Post-Secondary Education Act. It's modeled a little bit on the Canada Health Act. So it's this idea of dedicated funding with strings attached. So here is money for post-secondary education. You cannot pave roads with it. You cannot build bridges with it. It's for post-secondary education, but it's for making it accessible. And what does accessible mean? That means tuition. So we would start by putting that legislation together so that there would be a dedicated transfer to the provinces and they'd actually be able to start bringing tuition down. Thanks.
Okay, and finally, we'll hear from Andy.
Thanks. So I think the question of tuition and student debt is really a two-part issue, right? So the first is the idea of tuition, and that is something that is administered by the provinces, but clearly there's a role for the federal government in that. I totally agree with that. In this province, several years ago, the NDP provincial government began a series of quite draconian cuts to funding for universities. That's been going on for a while. They cut funding to universities by over 10% in a 3-year period, and of course that had the immediate effect of causing universities to raise tuition. So that was a serious problem. So the Liberal Party of Canada believes that a high-quality education should be accessible to anybody, whether it's in university or trades or apprenticeships, and the more people that we can provide an education to and make that education accessible to, the better off we're going to be. You'll be seeing a lot more details about the Liberal Party's platform position on post-secondary education in the coming week or so. Keep your eyes open, stay tuned, you're gonna really like what you see. The second part of the question is around student debt, and let's face it, student debt is a reality regardless of tuition. You're still gonna have to pay for housing and for food and for books and for soda pop, you know? So the trick is to make loans fair and to make them accessible and to make sure that students can pay for the loans when their education is done. So the Liberal Party will do that by making sure that we work with the provinces to have fair and accessible loans. We'll ensure that students can get excellent experiences while they're attending school. We have a program to invest $40 million in paid co-op placement, which will help local companies create new opportunities for schools, and by creating an economic environment in which students can gain excellent jobs when they finish school through that $60 billion investment in Canadian infrastructure, green infrastructure, social infrastructure, transit infrastructure, and weigh this well between now and October 19th. That investment is huge for this community.
So now each candidate will have a 1-minute opportunity for a rebuttal, and we'll start with Alan.
Me? Oh.
No, Alan, yeah.
Alan, do you want to?
Okay. Do I want a rebuttal? Is that what your question was?
Yeah, you have the opportunity.
You're going to get lots of promises. You're going to get them coming out of your yin-yang in this election campaign. It was this way in the women's debate. It was this way in the seniors debate. Never mind the promises. Only thing that is going to hold our member of parliament to account is you forcing them to be an account. The only thing that's going to do that is if you fight for your rights. There's nothing on high from a champion. It's from you that gives rise to the struggle against student debt, against tuition increases, etc. So I really encourage you to look at that. Do not look at the promises. You've seen promises before. Your parents have seen promises before. It is inherent in the capitalist system that they will promise you the sky and they don't deliver. It's you that has to fight tooth and nail.
Okay, up next, Thomas.
Alan, I agree with you.
I know.
Listen what you hear. We will create jobs. We will create jobs. We will lower the tuition. The reality is that we are getting less and less money here from the province, and it will even increase. So this is why I'm really proud that we are just saying, have a vision. Have a vision, not just try to fix it a little bit, which I hear since, so I'm campaigning a little bit longer than even with Leslie. Always the same kind of, yes, we will do it, but it's getting worse and worse. So have a vision. You know, Charles Tupper had a vision that every Canadian should be able to go to school. It wasn't, it wasn't law this way, but he campaigned for it, and you can do this. You have to have a big vision. And why not having the vision that our schools should be accessible and should be free for everyone to go? No tuition.
Okay, Irvin.
Thank you very much. I don't believe that I talked about any promises. What I want to talk about is what our government has done. Our government has created 12,000 new jobs. Our government has taken away the interest off of part-time student loans. Our government has made the eligibility for student loans much more accessible. I'm not talking about promises. I'm talking about what we've done. And if it's unfortunate that the Liberal government here in Nova Scotia took the cap off of tuitions to allow universities their own discretion in that area. The one promise that we have made, and it's based on our performance to date, is that by the year 2020, we will have created 1.3 million jobs in Canada. And those are jobs that are going to be ready for you when you graduate. You know, you guys are doing all the right things. You're living your life, you're coming to university, you're getting an education. The expectation there is for a job, and we'll provide it.
Megan?
Go ahead. Thanks. Just to follow up on the promises piece, Thomas is right. There have been a lot of promises, but Irving's also right. The Conservatives never have actually promised anything on post-secondary education. It's not been a priority, and they really do believe that it's not the responsibility of the federal government. But in contrast, I'll offer you where the NDP has put its money where its mouth is. We introduced the Post-Secondary Education Act in 2006. We introduced it again in 2008. We introduced it again in 2011. We are committed to this legislation, and we are so committed to it that in our shadow cabinet, so we sort of shadow the ministers. So there's defense, we have a defense critic or a shadow minister. There's a minister of health, we have a shadow minister of health. We have a critic for post-secondary education. I think that's really important, and it's something I'm really proud of.
And finally, candidate Fillmore.
Thank you. So the thing about commitments is that they all need to be paid for. And what we're hearing right now from Canada's most credible third-party analysts on the costing pieces for each of the respective platforms for the Liberal Party and the NDP is that the NDP costing piece is being referred to as a Swiss cheese financial policy. It's full of holes. Whereas earlier this week, the Liberal Party's economic costing document was released, and it has been called better and more implementable by an order of magnitude than the NDP. So I'm very confident making commitments. We know how to pay for them. We're gonna cost them, and I honestly, no number of acts proposed or passed are going to change the reality on the ground if the government, the NDP government, is committed to 4 years of balanced budget. That's austerity, and that's more cuts for Nova Scotia, and that's more hardship for you.
All right, thank you. Our second question is another video question from Aiden.
Oh, he's upside. He's on his side now.
That's okay, you can put things upside down.
Hi, my name is Ada McNally, and I'm a third-year student at University of King's College. As a student, I know that students have been at the forefront of combating sexualized violence on campus for years. In the last number of years, it's become evident that in Nova Scotia, we need federal action on this issue. Students deserve to feel safe on campus and in their communities, and we know that sexualized violence disproportionately affects trans students, racialized students, Indigenous students, students with disabilities, non-binary students, and women students. What will you and your party do to combat sexualized violence and to join students in our fight against rape culture to turn towards a consent culture?
I'm going to summarize that question for folks. Seems like it was a windy day today. The question was, what will you and your party do to combat sexualized and gender-based violence on campus, as well as to join students in the fight against rape culture to work towards a culture of consent? So, the first candidate is Thomas. You have 2 minutes.
All right, yeah, it was a very interesting time in the spring. A lot of scandals, Giangameshi, and then of course in Halifax we had our shares, especially with the universities. And you know, these are just examples. This just shows that we have a real problem which we have to address. So just pointing actually to, you know, I mean, these are good examples, but you know, because they come out, they show that it is actually widespread, and we should really keep this serious. Now, I don't know how to solve it. I think we have to work on building a much more inclusive society and not accept these kind of things. The way our government at the moment carries itself is not a good example, you know, to how to interact and really speak openly about things. Another example is this refusal of having an inquiry into the missing and murdered Aboriginal women. Without the government stepping in, and this is, there's a lot we can do locally, but this shows that we don't have even the willingness to start with it. We just saw we have really a deep problem. The best I heard during the discussion was that we have to, talking with our children, that we make clear that this is not acceptable, and the way we are treating each other is just so important. So I think we really have to work on this. I'm not a specialist on this, but I think the government should. I mean, this is a real problem, which I hope I hear some ideas how to solve them.
Thank you, Thomas. Irvin?
Thank you very much. I mentioned that I was a student here at Dal. What I didn't mention is I was in the transitional year program at Dal, the first year for that program. And that program was set up recognizing the disadvantage of blacks and Mi'kmaq in this province to a proper education. Because of segregated schools and discrimination within our school systems, we found that black and Aboriginal youth were not attaining the kind of high school education to get entry into Dal. So that program was put in place to level the playing field to allow me to attend Dalhousie University. What I'm talking about is blatant discrimination, blatant racism. No different than what women are facing with these issues around sexist comments, around all of the issues. So I, for one, can definitely recognize and appreciate the concerns and issues. I, for one, do not stand for that because I'm a personal victim of it myself. I've noticed on campus here the no means no, an excellent start. But I think that is a way to start that. We have to start with education. And with that education, we have to move it down to our public school system so that students understand from a very early age that no means no, and that a woman's body is her body, and it's not to be violated by men, and they're not objects, that they are equal to, on par with a man. I believe education is the key to that. Our government, one thing our government has done is made it illegal to transmit images of people without their permission, and that's a beginning. Of course, more needs to be done in that area. Thank you very much.
All right, next we have Megan.
Thanks very much for that question, and it's actually really nice to get it. That might sound counterintuitive, but we're not often asked those kinds of questions at debates, and I'm glad to see how important it is to students at Dalhousie. This year, my colleague Nikki Ashton, she's an MP from northern Manitoba, she brought forward a motion in the House for a plan, an action plan on violence against women. The first piece of it would say that within 100 days we would bring in an inquiry into murdered and missing Indigenous women. But it went on to talk about ways that we could actually combat violence against women, and with special attention to trans women, women with disabilities, racialized women. Unfortunately, it didn't pass in the House of Commons. I think that's actually a bit of a tragedy. But it will take that kind of holistic approach and that idea of looking at different issues through the lens of consent or through the lens of preventing violence against women. So there are lots of examples where we can do this. For example, my colleague Lauren Liu, she was working on a bill having to do with unpaid interns. When we realized that more than half of unpaid interns in Canada are women, and they are not given protections that workers are given. They're not protected from sexual harassment in the workplace because they're unpaid interns. So it's about using that lens when we look at everything, and Lauren actually brought forward a bill to deal with that and offer protections to unpaid interns. And it's using that lens for things like human rights, when we look at what human rights there are, why don't we have transgender rights included in the Canadian Human Rights Act? Why isn't trans hate towards trans people considered to be a hate crime under the criminal code? That's something else that we've brought forward, but unfortunately got stalled in the Senate. Unaccountable, unelected senators making those decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. Next, we have Andy.
Well, thanks for the question to the sideways friend. Look, as a husband and to a wife, and as a father to a young daughter, this is extremely personal, a personal question to me. I was really buoyed this fall to start hearing all of the stories that were coming from the university campuses around Nova Scotia and beyond about how student groups and about how administrations had been creating very innovative on-campus programs to stop violence against women and sexualized violence before it was going to happen. And I think that shows to me that the dialogue that needs to happen publicly is happening, and that people in our community are taking action against that. So that was really great to hear, and I think we're on the right journey. But look, the truth is that it's going to take everybody in this and every community to end violence against women and end sexualized violence. It's going to take every man in this room to end violence against women. And I invite that conversation into this room right now. One of the, thank you. One of the most present and pressing issues that we're facing right now under this topic is missing and murdered Aboriginal women, and I hope that you know that the Liberal position on that is to immediately upon taking power to launch a thorough investigation to solve crimes that have committed and to find remedies to prevent future crimes from happening. There are also links. Poverty is a high indicator for the instances of violence against women, and the Liberal Party has several very strong policy pieces to help lift Canadian women out of poverty and therefore address that indicator for violence as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, we have Alan.
My stepdaughter was a victim of sexual assault, etc. So it strikes really close to home on this. And it was so good that the first debate was on the issues of women a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, etc. It's extremely important. I also like to salute the women in this room. And in a very rough survey, it looks like the majority in this room are women. It shows the concerns that you have. It shows that you want to know on these political questions, and I strongly suspect that you're fighting on these issues, so I really encourage you to continue to do so. The Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada, our national leader is a woman. The first secretary of my party is a woman. Historically, I don't know this election, but I suspect it's the same. The majority of candidates that we run are women. And these are not token gestures. These are the high esteem with which we hold working class women to lead the fight of the Canadian working class and people for their rights, to destroy and dismantle this man-eating, woman-eating capitalist system and develop a humane social system that comes in place. My party also stands for the National Inquiry into Missing and Aboriginal Women, etc. I would like to raise that one ugly thing that comes up in this campaign nationally at least, I hope not locally, is on the niqab, the address. Who can dictate to women how they should dress in this society? We are all citizens, we are all residents of this country. It's not up to the state to determine how people dress or whatnot. And so I think that's a very ugly aspect of the Harper regimes. And this, the Team Harper.
All right, now we're on to 1-minute rebuttals, starting with Thomas.
All right, so again, we all agree that something has to be done. We all agree that it is really a big issue which involves many levels of doing things. I I didn't completely catch why unpaid interns are more susceptible to sexual violence.
They're just not protected.
So paid ones are protected? In which way?
They're protected by workers'
By
rights. Yeah.
workers' rights?
Yeah.
Well, it should not be a question of workers' rights. And I don't think that people will ask before if you are paid or not if, they have sexual violence. Anyhow, my point was that we have to study this. We have to do much more in a holistic way, and I think we agree all of this. I don't know still a magic bullet for it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Irvin.
Thank you very much. 1 minute rebuttal on the question. I think I've said it all in my response to the question. It's something that needs to be eliminated immediately, and it's going to take each and every one of us to assure that happens. I know, when I became a father, that was a priority to me, that my children, and not just my boys, but also my daughter, understood the value of women. And I think as you go out into life and as you begin to start your families, I think that's the beginning, that's the most important part that we can each play in terms of eliminating it. There's lots of carryover from the old days in our society that each and every day we work towards eliminating, and that is just another one of them. And, one thing,
Next, we have Megan. You have 1 minute.
Thanks. I'll pass on my rebuttal. Thank you.
All right. Then we have Andy.
Oh, sure. Look, everybody at this table will work hard to try to end violence against anybody. We all agree with that, and I don't think there's anything to rebut there. I would just take a moment then to, since the question of the proportion of female representation was raised, I just wanted to share with the room that the Liberal Party's leader, Justin Trudeau, has committed that his cabinet will be comprised of 50% women, so that there'll be an equal number of both genders in his cabinet, which is really great news for Canada. Thank you.
And last, we have Alan.
no, Alan started.
I'm already on to question 3. I wanted to, there's so many things to raise. We don't have time to raise them. They got lots of advertising dollars. I want you to go to mlpc.ca. No, since 1970, when our party was formed, we have a daily newspaper. Yesterday's issue was on women. It was on Take Back the Night. At the women's debate, I had a Take Back the Night button with me, etc. So go to MLPC, look at Democratic Renewal, look at the articles it's covering, not just on women, not just on violence against women, but on a huge range of issues. So I can only reiterate my abhorrence of sexualized violence, be it against women, be it against trans, etc. They are my allies, week in, week out in these demonstrations at Victoria Park, and we must stand together. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have a question from Alistair. It's one of several questions on the issue of funding basic research and protecting scientists' academic freedom.
Hi, my name is Alistair, and I'm a third-year physics student here at Dal. My topic relates to research funding and the current movement away from funding fundamental research in favor of only research with commercial applications, which could have dangerous consequences. For example, this summer I worked at the MRI lab in the QE2. This research has potential for commercialization, so it is well funded. But the entire field of MRI wouldn't even exist had some researcher not taken the time to wonder why a proton in a magnetic field acts the way it does. What steps are you planning on taking to ensure that all levels of research get the funding that it needs?
So just briefly to recap, the question was, what will your party do to ensure all research is adequately funded? And we will start with Irvin.
Research and research funding. Our government is committed to working with universities such as Dalhousie. We have committed millions of dollars in terms of funding research here at Dalhousie University. There are, I would hope, Thomas, there are scientists at universities who, through the universities, have the freedom of expression, have the freedom to print their papers, have the freedom to give lectures to our next generation of Canadians. So our government is very committed to supporting that research at universities. First-class research that comes out, and I think of areas such as the oceanography department here at Dalhousie, which has done some fantastic work. Our research that is being done in our hospitals, which is funded in large part by our federal dollars. We continue to support our fine hospitals here in Halifax for research to be done there. And some of the leading research in Canada is carried out in Halifax, and we will continue to support that research. Thank you.
Next, we have Megan.
Thanks very much. Earlier, when I talked about our commitment to post-secondary education, and I talked about the fact that we have a post-secondary education critic, I don't think that the current cabinet actually lays out what our priorities are as Canadians. So I think there are things missing. And one thing that we recognize is missing is someone to take on the issue of science and technology. So we actually do have a science and technology critic. We think it's important enough. And most recently, it's been Kennedy Stewart, who is a former professor, and he is an MP out in British Columbia. And I've talked to Kennedy a lot about this issue. So whether it's NSERC or Sustainable Development Technology Canada or the National Research Council, there are these different funding bodies, but also places where you can do research. And the key is to stop cutting them, because they have been cut to the bone. But I think you can innovate as well. I really do question the drive for everything to be about commercialization, that there has to be this commercialization end. Because like the person who asked the question said, sometimes you just discover things. Sometimes there's basic research that needs to be done where there's no necessarily a commercialization outcome. It's just research and science for the sake of research and science. So I think that the hard turn, this happened probably around 2009, there was this hard turn to say that everything has to have this commercialization outcome. So we would sit down and look at those kinds of criteria for when people are applying for funding and see whether it's even necessary, because we certainly question it. We're also looking forward to sitting down to the table to talk about how do these funding councils actually grant money, what is the application process like, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. And next up we have Andy.
All right, thanks. Look, this is so important. Universities across the country are constantly faced with the question of trying to find that balance between resources dedicated to teaching and resources dedicated to research. And the truth is they're interconnected. They can't be separated in that way. The resources that research projects bring to universities don't just fund research projects themselves. They fund operations, they fund the salaries, they give students a chance to learn new skills and gain employment, and they contribute to the innovations in our communities that universities create. So between the three major research arms of government, SSHRC, NSERC, and CIHR, our local universities receive tens and tens of millions of dollars of funding every year that turns into money into our economy, it turns into resources to help the universities operate, and it employs hundreds of local students involved in research projects. So a Liberal government will be committed to making investments in research programs and to include funding directed at improving our infrastructure and our green economy. So this reverses a direction and a trend that the Conservative government has taken on supporting research, as well as our universities and our students themselves. Additionally, research funding for our universities helps make our communities and universities and students better. The Liberal government will be a better leader in research and in student and university support. we will appoint a new chief science officer to help Canada stay at the forefront of research, and we will give scientists in Canada back their infrastructure, their funding, and most importantly, their voice back in Canada. I can tell you that on our volunteer team in this campaign, we have 5 scientists who volunteer. They give endless hours, and 2 of them have lost their jobs because of these cuts. They have looked at the 3-party platforms, and they have come to the Liberal Party to put their energies in because they want to get their jobs back. Thank you.
Okay, Alan, up next.
Thank you. One of my favorite TV programs is Big Bang Theory, so I know a little bit about applied and theoretical physics and the difficulty in funding it. But the Harper regime is destroying the concept of science. He's destroying the scientific community in this country. You see pictures of them throwing out fisheries libraries, etc., time and time again. This is a national crime that Harper is carrying out. Stop Harper. But the corporatization of universities is something that's been touched upon a little bit. So far, John Hutton talked about it in his paper to the Royal Society. Some years ago, a few years ago, we did a study here at Dal, the Marxist-Leninists, as well as some other students, on the militarization of the university. And the federal government was financing the Center for Foreign Policy Studies, etc. And one of the requirements of that money, and I dare to say it's the same with science research and that, is 60-some courses had to give a pro-military content, the history courses, the poli-sci. This was Ottawa's money dictating to the university how it should go. So we oppose the research of military-industrial complex, unless it's anti, on campuses. And that's a shameful thing of this university that it took part so much. It's a shame that this university has relations with Israeli, Zionist Israeli universities and that. So my party says increase funding for social programs. That includes science. That includes the, in answer to this question, on the front of applied science, etc. So thank you very much.
Okay, and finally, Thomas.
Well, this is my kind of question. And I have no idea where to start. 2 years ago, we had a Killam lecture where he explained us why haven't we cured cancer. And the short answer was, first we have lawyers. As soon as we discover something which has the potential of being useful, you know, they crawl over it, and it takes 3 years actually locked away until you can publish anything. And then once you have a patent, no one at the university can ever use it. We don't make any step towards it. There's so much more to say. At the moment, funding for basic research is gone. I work with little funds, which are, I have to work with companies. It's a lot of fun to work with them, but it's really just what the Conservatives have done, just use it. We are increasing funding, but we are really funneling this money into companies. So many of my colleagues have left, and more will leave if this will not change. It is not just a matter of more funding. It is actually trust scientists. We are not doing this to get rich. Believe me, I would do something else. Why can't we, say, someone is trusting, this is, I think, where we should go. No, some bureaucrat has to sit there and tell you, you have to explain to him why you need a pencil and not, a microscope, because you're a theoretical physicist like myself, for example. So, sorry, I can't do this in 2 minutes, but please talk to me afterwards. And our funding agencies, we're discussing this with my colleagues every day. We have to find another way. I think really the most important, trust, and science is important, and we should really listen to scientists. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now each candidate will get 1 minute rebuttal, starting with Irvin.
Thank you very much. It's interesting sitting here. As you guys probably feel here, this guy in the middle, almost in the middle here, is just getting it from both ends. But it's it's really, really great to hear the Liberals make all their promises, and they can because they plan on putting this country in deficit for the next 3 years if elected. They're going to put and so what happens with the deficit normally? Taxes go up. And who ends up paying the taxes? We, the citizens. And it's good to hear my good friend to the left here, they've got a critic for everything. I mean, everything we talk about, they have a critic for it. But, it's nice to criticize, but let's have some solutions. Let's come up with some constructive things that work on the ground for you, the students. Thank you.
And Megan?
Thanks. Irving, we like you. We just don't like your government. So, I met a woman who worked at Environment Canada. She thanked me. She said, "Thank you for the work that you're doing on the environment file. It means a lot to us." And I said, "Oh, that's really great feedback. Thanks for that. Can I get your card?" And she said, "No, I don't think I can give you my business card." I know an air quality expert who works for the federal government, who is now working as a receptionist in the department where she used to test air quality. I met another scientist from another department who came and he said, "I just retired. I don't have the smoking gun for you, but I just want to tell you what it's like there. It's so demoralizing. We don't have anybody trusting us anymore." Well, the NDP really believes in science-based decision-making, not, contrary to what Harper's doing. And we would actually reinvest in government science as well. Thanks. That was fast.
Andy?
Well, thanks. Again, every one of us up here would like to restore funding to science and give scientists their voice back. But the thing about that is you need to have the funds. And as of today, only the Liberal Party has produced a credible costing document to show where those funds would come from. And now I just want to respond to Irvin's comment about deficit. Yes, the Liberal Party has plans to run a modest $10 billion deficit for 3 years to pay for this incredible investment program that we're talking about. At $10 billion a year, that is 50% of Prime Minister Harper's annual $20 billion deficit. This is not a hardship. And in a $2 trillion economy, it's insignificant.
Okay, Alan, 1 minute.
Thank you. A lot of this about academic funding and on science and that research and that ties in with the nation-wrecking agenda of the Harper regime. It's not just the Harper, it's the Liberals, etc. It's the monopoly capitalist class. We live in a system for the benefit of the few, of the rich. And I think it's important to have a nation-building project. That's what we in the Marxist-Leninists are fighting for. We've had nation-building projects before. We need them again. We need to stop wrecking the economy. We need to stop wrecking the culture. We need to stop wrecking the sciences. We need to build. We need to build the nation. Thank you.
And finally, Thomas.
Tomorrow night, there's a panel discussion in the Central Library about Get Science Right. I really invite everybody to come there. If we are not listening to scientists are muscles, and where do we start if we don't, have evidence-based debates? And this is it's really critical, so we have to do something about that. As I said, funding increase, most of the funding I need is for my students. It is easy to get money for big, nice machines, which politicians can say, "See, you have something here." But we have to invest, in people who are thinking about the problems. Just making shiny machines is actually not the way to go. So funding is important. It is not actually that matter of increasing it like crazy. Just, give scientists some say, and they, really, they know where to use it.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to questions submitted by the audience. Many of the questions that were submitted tonight were actually similar to questions that had been submitted prior to the debate on issues like Indigenous rights, climate change, funding for post-secondary education, and youth unemployment. But with that, I'm going to move on to the first question. So statistics were released this year noting that in G20 countries and beyond, women were paid less than men, did most of the unpaid labor, and were overrepresented in part-time work. In Canada, full-time employment rates for women aged 25 to 64 have held steady over the past 5 years at 57% on average, compared with 76% for men. This gap is the most striking among Aboriginal women, whose employment rates are 15% below those of non-Aboriginal women. In your opinion, what can policymakers do to advance women's equitable economic participation in society? So we're going to start with Megan.
Thanks for that. I'm trying to think at the federal level. I mean, obviously, the NDP has been a proud supporter of pay equity, that women be paid equal to men. Also at the federal level, I do think that something like our child care plan is an economic issue. It's good for the economy. For every dollar that you invest in childcare, you get $1.70 back into the economy. But also, we've seen the example in Quebec when they introduced their childcare program. 70,000 women went back into the workforce. I mean, women need to be able to have that choice if they want to stay home or if they want to keep working. And that also helps with the fact that when women are taken out of the workforce for a period of time, they lose that ground, they lose that experience, they lose those wages, and they come back at a lower wage. So I think it just exacerbates it. All of us have been knocking on doors, and you would be amazed how many, in the middle of the day, how many women are at home, and they'll tell us, I know they'll tell all of us, that they're home because they actually can't afford childcare. Because when they look at the cost of childcare versus how much they're making, it's like, well, I might as well stay home and take care of my kids. That's not real choice. So pay equity, absolutely, those kinds of reviews, but also thinking a little bit outside the box and thinking about things like childcare and how that can actually help women as well. Thanks.
Next, we have Andy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this continues to be a significant problem, and I see it in my own life, and unfortunately for too long. And I certainly heard about it. Have heard about it from my sisters and my mother, and from others very close to me. They tell me, and I see too, that we've come a long way in 25 or 50 years, but there's a long way still to go. There's a very long way to go. The Liberal Party, I'm very pleased and proud of what they're proposing to help with this. The big piece is a significant tax cut for middle-income earners in Canada. This is going to put more money into households. It's going to allow people to make choices about the way that they can then spend their disposable income. They're going to have disposable income again after a very long time of not having any disposable income for a long time under the current federal government. Things have gotten a lot harder. But the really big one, I think, that's going to help in our community is the new and very generous and extremely tax-free, completely tax-free, Canada Child Benefit that the Liberal government will put into place right away. That's a benefit of up to $533 per child per year, tax-free. So here's an example. A single parent in Halifax with 2 kids earning $30,000 a year would end up getting $13,000 a year tax-free to help raise that family. That's incredible. That is a huge benefit. The challenge with the NDP's $15 a day daycare plan is that it can't be implemented. If it could ever happen, it will be 8 years from now. Kids that are looking for daycare now won't be affected. And if it ever does come into play after 8 years, it can only happen if the provinces agree to pay their 40%. And provinces are saying they simply can't afford it. No way will Nova Scotia be able to afford the money to pay 40% of a $15 daycare plan. It's never going to happen in Nova Scotia. Right?
Next, we'll hear from Alan.
Once again, I draw your attention to mlpc.ca because this question was answered quite well in yesterday's publication of Renewal Update, so much more eloquently than I can possibly speak. But I'd also like to say it's not just a matter, I don't think it came up here, but equal pay for equal work as a slogan. I would take it a step further. It's not just a matter of addressing pay equality by equal pay for equal work, because a lot of women do not work, or they're ghettoized in certain industries where they may be being paid with the men in those industries. I could give you numerous examples. So the issue is equal pay for work of equal value. That way you have to put in the mechanisms to determine the value in that, yes. So it's a broader issue than just equal pay for equal work. It's equal pay for work of equal value. I'll save the rest for a rebuttal, perhaps. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Thomas.
So I guess the question was severalfold. So youth unemployment is very high, and it's twice the average of the country. This is compounded for women, and even more compounded for Aboriginal and Aboriginal women. So there are clearly, many things we have to address. This is quite different, by the way, in other countries where youth unemployment, for example, is much less than the average. So there are countries, and you should ask yourself, why is that? Why is in Canada, and I'm not sure in the US, but in North America, I think the trend is reversed to countries like Switzerland and so on. Meg already mentioned this really interesting experiment in Quebec where child care support really made a difference. But this alone was not enough. It's still, unequal for even the same jobs. So there's more to be done. There is a good precedent, I think, in the government actually. So there's a study from the Canadian Centre for Political Alternatives who compares the cities, and which has actually the best women issues addressed, and Gatineau is, I think, one of them, and Victoria another one, and it's due to the government actually. So they're doing something right, trying really to encourage more women to take part of it, and setting quotas is one way we have to start with, and it seems to work. So there are many things, of course, with Aboriginals. We still have, so much to address. Let me stop here.
And last, we have Irvin.
Thank you very much. Women's issues. I'm very sorry that I couldn't get to the women's debate. This is a very important issue to me, very close to my heart. In Halifax, and that's who I'm running to represent, is Halifax. In Halifax, people of African descent make up 3.6% of the population. And yet African descendant women make up 7.7% of all those people on low income. Those numbers are staggering. When we look at the family unit in terms of single-parent families, what you'll find is the majority of single-parent families are headed by women, those very same women who are below the poverty line here in Halifax. So if we're going to deal with an issue around equity, if we're going to deal with an issue around women, I would hope that my colleagues here at the table, their parties would make a statement that that would become their first priority, that they will deal with that situation to level the playing field, because when a woman who is the head of the household is under that kind of pressure, that affects not just her, but the whole family. So for me, that's my priority in terms of leveling that playing field, in terms of doing more for education to ensure that those children get educated, to doing more for health care to ensure that they are in a healthy spot. In terms of daycare, you know, those folks don't need $15 a day daycare. They already have subsidized daycare. So the $15 a day daycare does not help them. So they already have subsidized daycare. What we need is we need an intervention for early childhood education. Thank you.
All right, candidates can now have 1 minute each to respond, starting with Megan.
Thanks. The Liberals keep saying that childcare is too hard. We can't do it, it's too hard. Well, you know what? The Liberals were government for 12 years. They promised us childcare. They delivered 0 spots. So if they're not ready to do it, then step aside because the NDP is. And Thomas is right when he says childcare isn't enough. I agree with him 100% on this. And that's why we have to apply this gender lens to policy. So if you look at something like CPP, the Canada Pension Plan, which is there to lift, it was designed to lift seniors out of poverty. Well, after a few years, they realized it's not helping senior women because women were not in the workforce as long and tend to have lower contributions to CPP, so they were still living in poverty. So we have a guaranteed income supplement. We will raise the GIS. That is incredibly important for seniors, but it's also a gender approach to looking at how we can support seniors. Thanks.
All right, Andy.
Oh, good. Okay. Look. Canada in 2006, under the leadership of Paul Martin and Ken Dryden, had a national daycare system. It was being rolled out. However, it was abruptly canceled when the NDP joined the Conservative Party and voted down the Liberal government, knowing that it would put an end to the national daycare system. We've lost a decade of national daycare because of the NDP's self-interest. We do know how to do it. We have a much better plan. Listen, I can't hear that we're one election away from a national daycare system. We're not. It's going to be 8 years. That's at least 2 to 3 elections, so let's get that straight. The Liberal Party has set forth a benefit to families that will help to cover the costs of daycare more generously and with more flexibility than the NDP, and we're committing $20 billion to social infrastructure investment that includes thousands and thousands and thousands of daycare spots. The answer is coming, and it's costed, and it's not 8 years away.
All right, Alan.
Is this rebuttal now? Or?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't like these lights, you know, like, whew. Anyway, why are women paid less? Do they do less work? Do less quality work? Why do blacks get paid less, et cetera, that Irving's been talking about? Why do Aboriginals? Why do these students work in a sushi bar and getting $2 or $3 an hour that was in the press yesterday? Monopoly capitalism is a system that eats people up and spits them out, and they will always drive wages and other things down to the lowest denominator. The only thing that brings them up is fighting. And you fight on this front. If you're not fighting on that front, there they go. So it's not just pay equality for women, it's pay equality for all. As a Marxist-Leninist party, I think that we will be working on that very much so. Thank you.
Thomas.
So I hope you have time really to look at our platform. There's a lot in there. So in terms of the issues, so for example, one of the things which struck me is that we are really working on a guaranteed livable income. So again, poverty is a big issue. It's again compounded for women, and this has to do that they have, especially single women, caring for their children, having to do several jobs, housing. Is a part of that, so there's a whole bunch of things we really have to look at. I have to throw this in that it was a shame that we couldn't have the national debate on on women's issues with Mr. Mulcair, and that's a shame.
And last, we have Irvin.
Thank you very much. My rebuttal is simply this. During my address on the subject matter, I offered a challenge to the other parties sitting at this table, and your silence speaks volumes. We need to address that huge inequity that women of African descent are facing and dealing with every day here in this city and in this province and in this country. So your silence speaks volumes, and that's my rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay, next we've got a question from Divest Dal about climate change.
Scientific consensus tells us that we must keep 80% of proven fossil fuel reserves in the ground if we want to avoid catastrophic climate change. Yet Canada's love affair with fossil fuels has led to the abandonment and muzzling of government scientists, industry subsidies to the tune of $1.3 billion a year, and an over-reliance on fossil fuel royalties, which has put our economy into a state where economic growth or recession depend on volatile oil prices. We need to phase out fossil fuels and transition to clean energy and economy as soon as possible. When will you do that and how?
Could I have that question?
So first off, we'll start with Andy.
I think Irvin was asking to read too.
Had trouble.
Oh, sure. So I think the question was, what will your party do to address the issue of climate change?
Okay.
And specifically in the topics of fossil fuel industry divestment or investments.
Okay, thank you. Well, I know this. It's that after a decade of Harper government, Canadians can no longer feel that they trust their federal government to protect their best interests when it comes to the environment. A Liberal government plans to undo the damage that has happened underneath the Harper Conservatives and will improve Canadians' quality of life, the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the beaches and national parks that we play in. And there is a multi-part plan for that, and I urge you to take a look at it. It is very detailed and much more that I could crack into in the time tonight. But if you were to look at realchange.ca and zero in on the Canada and the environment section of that page, you will see a wealth of very detailed information, very well researched and very well documented. So I urge you to do that. The Liberal plan is focused on several areas. One is protecting our oceans, and there's a very robust platform piece on that. The next one is on creating clean jobs and green investment, and that's really where that $20 billion in the green economy comes in to create jobs and innovation there. It's about taking action on climate change, and that right away, a Liberal government will attend the Paris Climate Conference and within 90 days hold a First Ministers' Conference to work together on a framework for combating climate change and reducing Canada's carbon emissions. We'll establish national emissions reduction targets. We'd phase out subsidies for the fossil fuel industry, and we would work to develop an ambitious North American clean energy and environmental agreement. And there's also a very strong piece about preserving and protecting and promoting our national park system. Now, on a personal level, part of my work with the City of Halifax was as the manager of the Sustainable Environment Management Office, and I spent a year building a culture of green in a 3,000-person bureaucracy to help this city get off of fossil fuels and move to a sustainable future. Thank you.
Alan?
First, I would like to salute the youth and students that are in Divest Dal. Some of your work is widely publicized in Halifax Media Co-op and in Dal Gazette, etc., but I'm sure a lot goes unnoticed, but I salute those in Divest Dal for their work. On the issue of climate change, my party points out not just on the natural environment and the devastation of the natural environment and the need to promise this and promise that and do this and do that. You have to intimately tie it in with the social environment. When you have a social environment based upon exploitation of man by man or person by person this awful monopoly capitalist system. How are you going to solve the problems of the natural environment? So we totally tie these in as struggles that go on hand in hand. I'm an anti-war candidate. The greatest user of fossil fuels on this planet is the US Pentagon. So I stand against the Pentagon. I've been campaigning against the warships that come in here. I've been campaigning against the national shipbuilding strategy. We need a coastal defense force, not a blue water navy. All these are major polluters, especially the U.S. Pentagon that Harper regime so idolizes and so spends all our hard-earned money, tax dollars, on building the various aircraft, etc. So I think war is the most devastating aspect and the greatest cause of climate change and that. So both as an anti-war activist on fighting it on that front and as a Marxist-Leninist fighting it on that front, on fighting the millions of fights that need to be waged, including here at the Vestal. Thank you.
Up next, Thomas.
Thank you so much. This really gives me hope. This is the first time we get this question, what about climate change? And thank you that this comes from the youth. You're the only one who can change it. Of course, the Green Party is all about building a green economy. So yes, please let me talk about it. With two minutes, it is difficult, but just some highlights. Of course, oil is not the way to go. I was really so disappointed that about Mr. Mulcair, because the NDP cares, I know, and Megan cares about the environment, I know that. But just to not be clear about it, that oil has to stay in the ground, I think was wrong. I read actually the Liberal platform on green politics, and it reads really like, of course it's now popular to say things, but what about the pipelines? Make a clear statement. And only the NDP and the Greens have clearly stated that we cannot support these pipelines. We have to start to invest in local business. We are spending a lot of money. We're subsidizing oil instead of opening up the business here for you to actually start business and local business. We have a lot of resources in Nova Scotia. We have wind, we have water. What are we doing about it? Travel a little bit outside of Nova Scotia and you see, wind turbines anywhere. Why are they not here? They are starting up, and there's a lot of debate about that they have to always to build in the, the prettiest places and not out where no one is. But, we can debate this. So green economy is, of course, the central part, a green, sustainable economy, what we are really working for. So, again, please read our platform.
Okay, Irvin, next.
Thank you very much. Canada's a country that's very rich in natural resources. Much of our country's electricity is generated by hydroelectricity. That allows us to produce clean electricity with minimal emissions. We also have developed a strong oil and gas industry here in Canada that we need to move away from. But you can't tomorrow just stop having oil and gas. My house is heated by oil. What would I do if there was no oil to heat my house? The other thing is, these industries have allowed us to pay for a lot of infrastructure and programs that we have here in this country. We've made investments in renewable energy. The provinces have done a great job at also encouraging renewable energy development. In fact, we've invested in tidal energy development here in Nova Scotia. That is an excellent opportunity for this province. We've also put in place regulations to eventually eliminate the use of coal-fired electricity generating plants, like here in Nova Scotia, to further reduce emissions. You know, people are talking about save the sharks, save the whales, save this or the other type of species in our oceans. You know what our real challenge is? Save the oceans, because our oceans are dying. So, you know, we as people living on this planet have to be connected to this place that we call home. So it's only to each and every one of our benefits that we take measures to protect Mother Earth. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, Megan.
Thanks. I got a lot to say on this. Tom Duck, Dalhousie scientist, did a blog post today, and he has a bar graph with all of the commitments. So we've got the EU and the UN and Ontario and Quebec with their provincial targets. We've got the Green Party and the NDP, and we're all kind of the same. We're all comparable to each other on one end of the graph. And they're good commitments. The Green Party and the NDP have different mechanisms. I disagree with the mechanism. We can fight about the details. But we believe that these are our targets. Then way down here, this tiny, tiny little bar, it's barely even a bar, it's just a blip, is the Conservatives. There's no commitments there. I mean, it's very sad. But then the final piece is the Liberals, and he's actually put a question mark there because they have no targets. So Stephen Harper has not said he's going to the climate change conference in Paris. Justin Trudeau has said he's going to go, but he's probably going to eat baguettes because he doesn't actually have a target that he can present to the international community and say, this is our mandate, this is what we're going to do. The NDP has put it in legislation. We will legislate our targets. But then how do we do it? That's the million-dollar question. Well, we get rid of the subsidy to oil and gas sector to the tune of $1.4 billion a year. We transfer that subsidy instead into green tech to support renewables in this country. We invest in energy efficiency. The Conservatives canceled the Eco-Energy Home retrofit program that saw good, deep reductions, but it also saved us money on our heating bills, and it also created jobs in every community in Canada. We will invest in renewables. The transition has to happen. It can't happen tomorrow, but we should have started yesterday. It's too important not to. Thanks.
On to 1 minute rebuttals, starting with Andy.
Thanks. Look, the Liberal Party's not going to just make something up. They're not going to go in a committee room in Ottawa with the MPs and make something up without talking to Canadians. We're going to talk to Canadians first. We're going to, through the First Minister's conferences, we're going to talk to Canadians. We're going to talk to provincial governments. We're going to talk to Canadians about what these targets should be. We're not going to do to Canadians. We're going to do with Canadians. And then we're going to set those targets, and we're going to work with the provinces to achieve those targets through a multitude of means, not some unilateral program being inflicted upon Canadians. That's not the right way to do it.
Alan?
On the issue of climate change, there's 1,000,001 solutions, mostly like individual solutions. At least 3 of the candidates here take bicycles. I take public transit, etc. So these are individual. We need systemic changes. But I want to, as I did in my briefest of radio interviews, because we don't get much publicity, devote a little bit of attention to the heroic Mi'kmaq Aboriginals in Elsipogtog and elsewhere that are fighting for Mother Earth. Annie Claire, who I'm proud to have as a shoulder-to-shoulder fighter on these fronts, recently had her charges dropped against her. So I salute her for fighting that fight. I denounce the New Brunswick government, etc., for bringing charges against her. I denounce the RCMP for fighting against people that are fighting on the front of climate change. I am opposed to the pipelines. My party is opposed to them. Thank you.
Okay, Thomas, 1 minute.
So, Andy, you have first to talk to Canadians what these targets should be. What should it be? Do you know? You know, people have actually thought about it already, and you just have to read it.
Science.
And, you know, exactly. And it is true, NDP and the Green, we have actually at the moment this right target, and I'm looking very much forward to see you and Elizabeth, you know, in Paris really fighting for it. there are differences between the NDP and the Greens. So, for example, and it would be nice to talk about the details, cap and trade, for me, it really, the idea of, again, making a business out of it and open it for speculation is not as good as what we want to do, a fee and a dividend system. All right, so there are differences, and I really hope, we start talking about this with you. But nobody else, as I said, asked this question. So thank you very much for asking this question.
Irvin?
Thank you very much. The NDP, the Green, and the Marxist-Leninists, they're having a little love fest up here, and I'm stuck in the middle. Let's be realistic here. All of us want to see us deal with the climate change issue. There are no climate change deniers, but we have to be responsible in terms of the way in which we approach it. Like I said, my house is heated by oil. My car still runs on gas. We need to approach it in a reasonable and responsible way. And of course, in moving towards that green environment, that green economy, it's going to create work. But let's be responsible in our approach to it, and we have taken a measured approach to it. And our government has gone to the provinces to ask them for their targets on reductions.
So does he, and so does he.
And finally, we have Megan.
Thanks. Irvin, you're an enlightened conservative. There are a few climate change deniers in the House of Commons on that side. There really are. It's interesting to me that the Liberals are using the same argument about why they can't do childcare. It's too complicated. You have to talk to the provinces, but apparently that's okay when it comes to dealing with climate change. Thomas is right. We can set targets. You set the targets, and then you work with the provinces to figure out how you do it. So on Sunday, Tom Mulcair announced how we would do that, what our cap and trade plan would look like, and the key is something called equivalency agreements. This is something where you can say to a province, if you meet or exceed our federal target, then you don't have to participate in the federal program. And I think that's a good option for Quebec, which is part of a cap and trade program, BC, which has a carbon tax, because the provinces have been doing the heavy lifting in the face of zero action on climate change at the federal level. And kudos to them.
So now we've got another question from the audience. The question is, the Unfair Elections Act, Bill C-23, will make it more difficult for youth and students, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, people experiencing homelessness, seniors, and other marginalized voices in communities to cast a ballot on October 19th. The Act has also removed the ability of Elections Canada to promote and engage in voter education programs and conduct transparent investigations when parties commit electoral fraud. What is your party's plan to reform the Electoral Act in a way that encourages and ensures all Canadians have an equal right to vote, and that will guarantee a fair and transparent election process that also holds those who commit electoral fraud accountable? So the first answer goes to Alan.
What day was the demonstration through through Public Gardens? It was on the Unfair Elections Act. It was organized by CFS, I believe, and others. I participated in that, not the march, but upon their arrival on the rally they had on Unfair Elections Act. Again, don't want to sound like a broken record, but go to MLPC. This is the expanded version of our national program, which goes into great detail, or somewhat detail, on the issues of democratic renewal. We must take this electoral system out of the hands of the cartel party systems, including my party. You should be selecting the candidates. You should be nominating the candidates. Constituency commissions in every riding should be running the elections, not the political parties. It's extremely undemocratic the way this system is run. So Harper's so-called Fair Election Act, everybody's calling it the Unfair Election Act. We stand for abolishing it, of course, but it has to go much, much farther. You have to seize the democratic reins. You have to build a better Canada, not just keeping these tired, poor war horses back in power time after time after time. They will betray you every time. We must fight for democratic renewal, for democratic rights, for nation-building projects instead of nation-wrecking projects. And I really encourage you to go and look at our program on that. And don't believe the promises. Fight for your rights, fight to change the things. Youth, and I'm going to talk about it in my final summation, about some aspects of the changes that youth go through as they grow older. So thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Thomas.
We have one of the oldest electoral systems in the world, which was made for a two-party system. It's completely inadequate, and it has to change. And we know this. On top of that, it's Harper has really abused it, and it's just mind-boggling to see what he will do more. It's clearly we need a proportional system. There's a lot of debate on this. Fair Vote Canada, one of my favorite sites. I worked with them and went and talked to liberals about it, who for years said, it's the best system ever, as long as they were it served them, and suddenly their numbers are down, and then it's different. The NDP, of course, knew this long time ago and always campaigned on this. And we didn't have so far a federal NDP government, but in every provincial one, it didn't happen. And in ours, Dexter was actually campaigning on it, and I asked him after this and several others, and we didn't even get a response. We said, we can help. Let's make this really now work, and it never happened. So I really hope that the other parties and all will work together to finally change this. This is really so much necessary. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Irvin.
Thank you very much. When I was listening to the question, something jumped out at me, and it was in reference to, making it hard or making it impossible for First Nations and minorities and poor people to vote. Well, you see, I come from a different perspective because I come from that perspective. So from that perspective, historically, no one's never put us in the census. No one's never put us on the rolls. So when whatever the organization was, Elections Canada, rolled out the voters list, we never found ourselves on it. So therefore, we never got the voter card in the mail. So what did we have to do? We went to the polling station, and we had 2 pieces of ID, and we were allowed to vote. So historically, from my perspective, I don't see a big change. I really, really don't see a big change. Now, for the privilege to, get on lists and have accessibility to these things, maybe you see a change. But from my perspective, there's no change. It's a requirement to have 2 pieces of ID. And on another note, what it safeguards against is all of those people in the graveyard coming to vote. And it has happened before. There's been voter fraud in elections. So this is a way, now you have to show 2 pieces of ID to prove who you are and prove you live in the riding in which you are voting. And for me, historically, that's always been the case. So I don't see a change. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Megan.
Thanks. The NDP fought tooth and nail against the Unfair Elections Act. We did everything we could, even if it was just a procedural issue that we could bring forward to prolong the debate, just so that Canadians could have time to understand what the changes were in this bill. We brought forward hundreds of amendments. We brought forward amendments at committee. We fought and actually were successful at getting more time at committee to study this. Not that the Conservatives listened to any of the witnesses. We did have one success, and that was vouching. They rolled back on vouching, where you could actually have someone come and say, yep, I know who this person is, I swear an oath. Originally vouching was in the Unfair Elections Act, taking that right away, and we managed to get that back in. So that was a victory, but it wasn't a huge victory. So like I said, we fought tooth and nail against these changes. The NDP is committed to democratic reform. We want to make it easier to vote. And the thought that Election Canada can't work to promote voting is beyond bizarre. We would give that right back to Elections Canada. But also, when it comes to democratic reform, we're very committed to the idea of proportional representation. So actually looking at our electoral system, looking at and bringing in proportional representation, it would mean better representation for you, more direct representation for you. Everybody's vote would count. It would mean more women could be elected. It could mean more Green Party members. It could even mean that Marxist-Leninist Party could have some MPs in the House of Commons. Wouldn't that be radical? So we're committed to democratic reform in many different ways. Thanks.
And now we'll hear from Andy.
You know, there's so much housekeeping, so much house cleaning to do after 10 years of Stephen Harper. Whoever is going to be elected is going to be very, very busy on doing all the horrible things that have happened. You know, whether it's, wanton acts of political vandalism, whether it's restoring the long-form census that was taken away, whether it's, giving scientists back their voice and their funding again, or whether it's undoing the cynical and what feels to me very American elements of the Unfair Election Act. We've got to get busy and we've got to get that done. But more than that, the Liberal Party, and again, I want to direct you to realchange.ca, has a program called Fair and Transparent Government, Open and Transparent Government, and it's at that website. And there are a number of elements that will modernize democracy and modernize government in Canada. Justin Trudeau has pledged that this year, 2015, will be the last first-past-the-post election in Canada if he's elected. The last one. He's pledged to restore the meaningfulness of question period by ensuring that the Prime Minister and MPs answer the questions that they've been asked. Wouldn't that be nice to see? He wants to dramatically reduce the fees for freedom of information requests so that information can flow more freely. He wants to be sure that disclosure of financial records of elected officials is very easy to get and regularly updated. And of course, a Liberal government will make voting more accessible to all Canadians if elected. Thank you.
All right, now you each have a 1-minute rebuttal, starting with Alan.
Okay. Thank you. Again, it's on the Unfair Elections Act, and I think it's extremely important. It strikes to the heart of why we're up here running in a campaign, etc. The illusion is created that this is some democratic process. It's not. The rich will continue to rule this country. We must fight as Marxist-Leninists. We must fight in elections, yes, but the fight is elsewhere. It's in the working class and people. It's amongst the youth and students to occupy the space for change, not this real change or time for change. You know, we need to occupy that change, that space for change. And without that, it doesn't matter how many elections. This is the 6th election campaign that I've been in for the Marxist-Leninists. They're a lot of fun. They're a lot of work. But the elections don't change the basic nature of capitalist system.
All right, next we have Thomas.
I really like the Liberal slogan that let's make this the last, past the poll system. And I hope we can all work together to do that. The Green Party is really about working together with the others. I want to stress that we are the only party who doesn't whip votes. So we are actually the only Democratic Party. But again, we like to collaborate. And I think, also coalitions are important. We wouldn't have a Harper government if it wouldn't be for these two not able to work together. 20, less than a quarter of eligible voters voted for Mr. Harper, and we have a majority government. Something is here wrong. And yes, let's make this the last first past the poll election. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Next, we'll hear from Irvin.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pass on my rebuttal. Thank you.
All right, next we'll hear from Megan.
Thanks. The NDP, hey, we tried to work with the Liberals, and then along came Harper, and he prorogued Parliament twice that year. Just something Al was saying about the power of people. I don't actually believe that politicians have a lot of power. So I'm not up here to say that, we'll bestow these things on people and the politicians are going to make it all happen in Parliament. Al's very right about the power of community. Politicians are powerless unless they have a community behind them. Right now, the politicians who are in power have a community of big oil. They have a community of banks behind them. I want to change that. I represent a social democratic party. I believe in the power of people to come together and say, we demand this. We want this. So hopefully we end up with a member of Parliament in Halifax who knows how to work with people and work collaboratively to actually make those things happen. Thanks.
And last, we'll hear from Andy.
I don't know if I want to get into this. So look, that's a really great point. Collaboration, working with people, engagement, consultation. I'm a city planner. I've helped to build this city based on those very principles. We didn't take one decision when we were doing HRM by design, or the economic development strategy, or the 25-year regional plan, or the redesign of the Cogswell interchange, or getting cars at a Grand Parade, or getting bottled water out of City Hall without talking to people. Everything that we do is about talking to people and involving this community. That's in my DNA. That is the belief system that I will carry with me always, and I look forward to representing you in that spirit if I get to Ottawa. Thank you.
Okay, so that's all the time that we have for today. We'll be posting all the questions that we received from students on our YouTube and Facebook pages, and sending all the questions submitted tonight to the candidates. So each candidate will now have 1 minute for closing remarks, and we'll start with Megan.
Thanks. 1 minute. Okay. This has been a delight. I know we're up here and we're arguing with each other, but I shouldn't speak for everybody. I have tremendous respect for everybody here at the table and people coming forward and putting their names on the ballot. I have tremendous respect for you for showing up tonight. Thank you for doing that. Again, thank you to the DSU for pulling this together. What I'll end with is letting you know that the NDP takes youth issues very seriously. We have the youngest caucus in the history of Parliament. We actually have young people elected. And you know what? We didn't stick them in the back to say, look, we have some nice young people. We put them in really amazing positions. Pierre-Luc Dussault, youngest MP ever elected in the history of Canada, and he is chair of the Ethics Committee. That place is a cage fight. And there he is, and everybody across party lines respects him. We value the input that they have, and we will put our money where our mouth is when it comes to youth issues. I'm running to be the Member of Parliament for Halifax. I would be honored if you think about voting for me on October 19th. Thanks.
All right, next we'll hear from Irvin.
Thank you very much. My sole purpose in coming here tonight to this forum is just to let you see the face of a conservative that's not a boogeyman. A conservative that comes from the grassroots. A conservative that cares about issues for Halifax, that knows what the issues are, and is prepared to go to Ottawa and deal with those issues. A conservative that knows the history of Halifax. And there's one thing that I want you to consider when you look across this table at that big bad party called the Conservative Party. Isn't it strange that it's the only party that has an African Nova Scotian as a candidate at the table? Thank you.
Strange.
And next up, we'll hear from Thomas.
Thank you. So, first of all, you have to vote. You know, not voting will not work. And I know it feels like sometimes you don't want even participate in all of this, what you see, you know, in the House of Commons. So you have to vote. Why should you vote for the Green Party? Everybody thinks, you know, your vote is lost. I think this is the only vote which really would stand out. It is clear, it is unlikely that I will win in this riding, but I'm running so that people have the chance to vote for our policies. It's not about policies. You say you want to abolish tuition, about the environment, about bringing the climate change to the forefront. I hope we can get 7%. This would show that Haligonians care about this, and this would stand clearly out also in the future. And this is so important. So strategic voting doesn't work, and I know it takes a lot of guts, but go and vote.
Next, we'll hear from Alan.
This is where we need 10 minutes, not 1 minute in the summation. I'd like to thank the Dalhousie Student Union, of which I used to be a member, and the CFS. I've been a member of several student organizations before that, NEFCUS, etc., and CUS, and now it's CFS. So I salute you for organizing this and the work you do. In 1972, I was a student here at Dal. I was in this room. I went out when the meeting was over, whatever it was about, out this door here, and I met Tony Seed. And this was at the end of a semester, and he invited me to a Marxist-Leninist study group. And I said, I will come to it, and I will join it in the spring semester. Unfortunately, I went out west for 27 years, and I missed it. But I joined the party. I joined the party out there. So this room means a lot to me. You students mean a lot to me. It's extremely important. I wore this, and proudly wore this red square with me today. This is what the Quebec students were wearing. This is for student rights. I salute you.
And finally, we'll hear from Andy.
Okay, thank you. Look, after 10 years of Harper government, we have stubbornly high youth unemployment, underemployment, and ever-increasing numbers of young people who have stopped looking for work altogether, and it's just unacceptable. Well, guess what? It's time to invest in young Canadians again, and that's just what a Liberal government will do. You've heard me talk already about some of the things that we plan to do, but this investment is in two parts. The first one is a renewed youth employment strategy with a funding of $1.3 billion. The second is a renewed jobs training program. Incredible funding. It's broad-reaching. It reaches all provinces. I want to share with you, I've been an indebted student here. I've been an unemployed graduate. I have been a tenuously employed employee, but I've also been an employer of graduates of Dalhousie. I've been an employer of student interns. I know exactly what you're capable of. I know it firsthand. Send me to Ottawa, and I will invest in you. The Liberal Party will invest in you. I ask for your vote on October 19th. Thank you very much.
So thank you to the candidates for participating in tonight's debate, and more importantly, thank you to all of you for attending. We strongly believe up here that students are going to be the game changers in the upcoming election. So if you're looking for more information, you can go to itsnosecret.ca, or you can drop by your local student union office.
Also, very quickly, there will be a poll right here in the Student Union building from October 5th to October 8th, where you can vote in any riding in Canada. And lastly, You're all welcome to come join us tonight at the Ward Room at King's for some post-debate discussion.
Thanks so much for coming out, folks.